we've got some dealer content on tap and another Pit and Quarry Hall of Famer who's going to share some perspective looking back and ahead here on Drilling Deeper today.
That's right. Before we get into that, though, we want to thank, as always, our episode sponsor, Geologic. Geologic uses scientific investigation and engineering design to provide innovative solutions to the most challenging mining, construction, and development issues in a safe, effective, and cost-efficient manner. When it needs to be done right the first time, call Geologic at 770-824-4212. Thank you, Geologic.
Yeah, thank you, Geologic. Here on episode 14, we're shooting this on April 24th, going live on May 7th. We still have a lot of content we're trying to unpack from the Ag 1 show that we attended, about a month and a half ago at this point. Did a lot of interviews, a variety of folks joined us in our booth on the lobby floor at the Music City Center, and we're going to unpack a couple of those, 3 of those today, actually, 2 of which are with dealers. When Jack and Marie and I were kind of trying to plan how are we going to organize this content, because we had a plethora of video and audio interviews coming out of the show. We kind of identified, we had a couple of good dealer interviews, one with Matt Dibble of Dibble Equipment, another that you did, Jack, with Clement Cazalot and Donny Barnas of Machinery Partner. And, we thought, let's put an episode together that's kind of centric with dealers, talking about the perspective that they have to impart, because dealers, from at least my seat at Pit and Quarry, they have maybe the best perspective on what's happening in the market, because they're looking not just upward with their manufacturer partners, whether they're selling crushers or loaders, rolling stock, you name it. But obviously they're looking downstream because they're trying to sell that equipment and they're servicing it. So they really do have a good handle on trends in terms of equipment supply and technology, how they're working with customers, what manufacturers are asking of them. They really are a wealth of knowledge, and we had a good opportunity to visit with a couple of dealers in the booth at Ag 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to go back to kind of what you started with real quick, you talk about having this plethora of content. I don't know about you, but I was very pleasantly surprised with sort of the turnout and the interest in our booth at Ag 1 to join the podcast. I know we kind of set out to obviously bring it there and sort of hoped for the best, but I mean, it just seemed like a good chunk of our days were taken up by podcast interviews, which was a great thing. So we certainly appreciate all the interest and support everyone has had for Drilling Deeper over the first soon-to-be 14 episodes, the 14th you're listening to now. So, that was just a very pleasant surprise and kind of a good problem to have of having all these interviews and all this content. But, yeah, you talk about dealers, they really are in that interesting spot, whereas, there obviously some manufacturers will sell direct to, end users, but dealers kind of being in that middleman role, they kind of have like you said, that unique perspective where you can go to them and say, what are you hearing from your customers? How are producers doing? And they can give you that perspective and say, oh, how's your manufacturer base doing here? How's your network working, and what are you hearing on that regard? So they really kind of get sort of that more full scope than you might get from different perspectives. So I think it was great that we were able to get Matt and Clem in here, two kind of different types of dealers, if you will, but both very smart guys and a lot of good insight as to what they have on tap for the rest of this year.
Dealers are interesting too, because they have that perspective usually from a regional point of view. I mean, sometimes there's dealers that only cover one state. They're dedicated to Texas, maybe bigger states. But, we just came out of a meeting here in our Cleveland office, Jack, and we were talking about dealers a little bit. And, we've noticed this trend that some dealers are getting very large. You look outward in the West, you got Kimball Equipment out there, Goodfellow. Malot's done some work on the dealer front with mergers and acquisitions. So some of the dealers, out there, while we see consolidation in other areas of the industry, whether it's producers, acquiring other producers or manufacturers acquiring other manufacturing businesses, dealers are finding ways to expand and spread their wings a little further, get bigger territories. There's a variety of dealers in terms of makeup out there, and that's something interesting too. I think it's also interesting talking to different dealers, whether it's Matt and or Clem and Donny that we had in the booth, or others across the industry, because they're covering things from a regional perspective. Still, there's not really national dealers, although maybe we're trending that way. I suppose some dealers are trying to move in a bigger and bolder direction. But it's interesting to hear what is happening in, a Dibble equipment territory, which is like New England and the New York, New Jersey area, Pennsylvania, versus, Machinery Partner. That's an online marketplace. And, I know listening through Clement and Donny's interview, they have a, pretty firm grasp on what's happening, it seems, industry-wide, because the nature of their business seems to be more national. So various perspectives that we're getting from various dealer voices, and that's kind of what you're going to hear a little bit today with our 2 dealer interviews. And once we play those, we're going to have another perspective. George Sidney, the longtime McLanahan Corporation president, he's in the Hall of Fame, the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame. He went in 2019, and I think what we're kind of going to hear from George is more of a macro perspective, I suppose, looking back, in his 45 years being in the aggregate industry, and then looking outward to the next 20, 30, 40 years. So thought there were some parallels between the things we heard from the dealers on today's show and George Sidney. So so with that, Jack, I say let's hear from Matt Dibble with our interview at the Ag 1 show in Nashville. Hey, Kevin Yannick, back at the Ag 1 here in Nashville, the Music City Center. Got Matt Dibble from Dibble Equipment with us. Matt, thanks for joining us in the booth.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We were having a conversation right before we turned the camera on and the mics on, and we realized that, you're a Buffalo Bills fan. I'm a Cleveland Browns fan.
Yeah.
We're both kind of, we've been stomped on a little bit, and because we're in the Music City, you reminded me that the Bills were a part of the Music City Miracle. And if you're in Buffalo, is there another name for that? Or
No, that's the name of it. And it's a painful day in the history of the team, but it's okay.
Well, hopefully we're not opening any old wounds.
No.
You being down here in Nashville.
No, luckily they've added some more tough losses to the Chiefs recently in the playoffs that make you forget about that one a little bit. But
well, again, as a Browns fan, and I know we talk about the Browns on the show a little bit, I feel for you. If the Browns aren't going to win the Super Bowl, Buffalo is my number 2.
There we go.
So,
America's team. They're really America's team. Everybody
not the
roots for
Cowboys,
the
huh?
No, it's not the Cowboys.
It's the Buffalo Bills.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, we're here in Nashville, and the Ag 1's rolling around here. It's day 2. We're in the afternoon, and from my view, it's been a solid show. We've had people in the booth
Yeah.
the last couple of days commenting on the show, what they see. What's your experience been so far in Nashville?
Yeah, it's been a great show, and it's a good chance for us because we have not only customers here, but we have all of our manufacturers here. So it's a really good chance to talk to the guys that we're working with all the time. They're all in the same room. So for us, it's great from that standpoint too, not just to see customers, but also to see our manufacturers face to face. So
yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I think I saw you in the Hayes Mag booth, and then Eagle Ironworks. I was over there this morning because they had a press conference and they mentioned Dibble Equipment.
Yep.
Yeah, so as a dealer covering a show, usually we don't see dealers with booths.
Yeah.
Once in a while you do, I guess.
Some of them do, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe talk me through what's a typical day like for a Dibble Equipment or for a dealer at a trade show like an Ag 1?
Yeah, so you basically we kind of we go between our different manufacturers' booths, and you kind of we know a lot of people here, so you can't really go too far before you see somebody and you have a little side conversation. And then we also set up meetings with customers too, so we might take a guy to a booth to have a specific meeting on something. So it's great from that standpoint. But a lot of time it's you're kind of going from one conversation to the next all day long. But they're long days, but it's a lot of fun, and we get a lot of work done here.
Just thinking about it, I mean, manufactured has a very specific product line they're selling. Maybe there's a variety of products. We're seeing more manufacturers kind of venture out and get into different areas. If you're a crushing manufacturer, maybe you add screens, something like that. But as a dealer, I mean, you got to wear a lot of different hats. You probably got to think on your feet a little bit sometimes too, because you're representing a vast array of products, various manufacturers. Is that challenging sometimes when you got everybody converging here? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we've had all of the relationships that we have with manufacturers for the most part. We've had for a long time. Things always change, but you got to stay ahead of the times and you got to stay on top of everything. But yeah, it's we provide everything that would be needed in a quarry or sand and gravel pit, concrete recycling. So we do wear a lot of hats, and we have to know the process from the beginning all the way out to the end. And the manufacturers that we partner with supply something for each step along the way.
So Matt, as you're in booths, talking to customers, talking to your manufacturing partners, what sorts of things are you hearing? What are customers saying about their businesses at this point in time? What's their outlook for the year, and what's the Dibble outlook for the year?
Well, what we're hearing is that everybody's busy. And we're hearing that on the manufacturing side. I was talking to a manufacturer yesterday that said last 2 years are 2 record years. and they're not alone. There's a lot of people that are doing the same thing. Our last 2 years for our company were record years, and I think a lot of producers are in the same boat where times are good, and everybody's busy, everybody's got a lot of work, so that's good for us, it's good for manufacturers, and it's good for our customers. So, there's not a lot of people that are, light on sales right now in terms of the producer side. People they're busy, and things are going strong. We've heard pretty regularly that there's a slowdown potentially coming, but you feel like you hear that every year, and it really hasn't come to fruition yet. So, yeah, I mean, we're busy. Lead times are on some things are a little further than they normally are. Some are kind of coming back the other direction, and they're getting a little sooner, which is good. But yeah, no, we're busy.
On the potential slowdown that you're hearing maybe right now, I'm not necessarily expecting that, and I don't hear a lot of that, but the people that tell that to you, what are they saying that derives from? What's their concern?
I honestly think that it's just people hear it, so they say it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I don't think there's any economists here that are saying that. It's like people hear it and they just pass it along. And I feel like I hear that every year. It's like, this summer things are gonna slow down. It's like, okay, but we've been busy for a long time, so it'll happen eventually. Obviously, the economy goes in a cycle, so eventually it will slow down. But it's certainly not happening now.
In your neck of the woods, you're covering several states in the Northeast, Matt. What is driving construction materials demand? I mean, it seems like right now, road building, whether it's roads, bridges, highways, there's a lot of opportunity and excitement around that. But how's residential in that neck of the woods? Do you have any sense of that? If that's tapered off a little bit, or are there pockets that are doing well? And maybe same thing on the non-residential side with industrial or commercial or manufacturing type projects. Is that helping your customers? Are they looking for equipment and plants related to jobs like those?
Yeah, there's in New York State built some casinos a few years back, so that brought some demand for our customers. Those are all built now. There's projects going up around the state. There's a big thruway project going on right now in Syracuse. So there's a lot of building going on. There's a lot of project work, and people are busy pretty much across the state.
Do you notice a clear difference, because you're covering New York State and other states, although maybe New Jersey's somewhat similar to New York in terms of the government or the tax side? We had a producer at our roundtable from New York State, Stuart Petrovitz, out of Route 82 Sand and Gravel, and he was just telling us, the people are flocking out of New York, and it's not a good thing. I mean, a lot of the big dollar companies are moving out, going down to the south, going to Florida. Yeah. Is that a concern that you have? And what are your customers in New York saying?
It's definitely something that you hear, and there's definitely some people that, just people that are moving out of the state. But I don't know that it's really that drastic or really as big as kind of what it sounds like it might be. I mean, there's always people that, live in New York and then they move south. They go to Florida, they retire, they go to Florida, whatever it might be. And we have one customer that sold his place in New York and started a place in Tennessee. But it's not, I don't know, I haven't seen the numbers on it, so I don't know if it's really as drastic as what some people say that it is. And I don't think it's slowing anything down. The housing market is strong. There's not a ton of new building going on, at least what I can see, directly local. Mm-hmm. It's the market up there is strong, but it is one of the tougher states to do work in, from just regulatory and the tax side of things. But it's been like that for a long time, so it's nothing new necessarily.
I feel like every time I probably have talked to you over the phone, this is the first time I actually got to meet you in person.
Yeah.
I don't know why it just happened now, because
I know
you've been to a few young leaders meetings.
Yeah.
And I've never met you there. Well, those meetings are getting kind of big.
They are big. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I heard that last year was the biggest show they've had, or biggest meeting they've had. And I think right now it looks like this year coming up in San Antonio will be close to that number too.
Wow, yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like NSSGA just continues to grow. I mean, same thing here with Ag 1. I think that's a good sign of the times. I mean, you're obviously a young leader, under 40. I'm still under 40 as of the filming of this. But
what time is it?
Right, I know, I'm getting close. But in terms of getting energy and new people and just some youth into this industry, how important or how lacking, has that been? I mean, we talk about various issues in the page of the magazine regularly, and I feel like addressing the next generation and making the industry conducive to people to want to come work in it is important.
Yeah.
What do you guys see, at Dibble Equipment? Do you have a viewer, an opinion on that? I mean, because you're in a family company,
Yeah.
so you kind of live this industry as a kid, I'm guessing, coming up.
Yeah.
I guess what's your view on where the industry is with people and with young people?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you have to bring people in and give them enough time to train and be on task and be working with your company in plenty of time before the older people retire. Because obviously it's natural, right? It happens all the time. But you have to have the plan in place to bring young people in for a few years before they're really ready. Because this industry is, it's not something you learn about in school. It's like you have to learn it by experience, and the only way to learn is to do it. So you have to bring people in and give them a lot of time to learn and really gain a lot of experience. And some companies do a great job of that. Some guys, the plan isn't quite as laid out. But from our standpoint, we are always looking at the future and looking at, all right, who are the people that we need to have in place for 5-10 years down the line.
What was your experience as a kid being around the business? Your dad,
Yeah.
Rod. Although it's Rod, right? Not
Yeah,
Rob.
not the pitcher.
Yeah, now I'm
Yeah,
confusing
not
myself
the
because of
pitcher
the
for the
Reds.
Reds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing you were, climbing on equipment, in the yard, roaming around playing. I mean, tell me about growing up in this industry.
It was a little bit, but it wasn't necessarily the plan for me, like growing up. Like when I grew up, it wasn't like, when I'm going to go to college and then I'm going to go work for Dibble Equipment. That wasn't really, I think my dad didn't want to put pressure on me to feel like I had to join the family business. So he kind of let me go do my thing. So I went to college for business. I studied finance at Ithaca College. And then after I graduated college, I went and I worked on Wall Street in Manhattan. So I did that for 3 years. And, it was time to either take the next job down there and go, a little further into the finance world. And my dad was expanding the company at that time. So he started the business in 2004, and it was really just him and my mom. And in 2014, they expanded. We got more territory. So at that point, we got all of New York State, all of Pennsylvania, all of New Jersey. So from a timing standpoint, it worked out. So that's when I made the move and joined the company in 2014.
Is your mom still involved in the company today? Or?
Yeah, she is. She has her role is paying bills and paying payroll, and she also watches over the accounts receivable list with a she pays close attention to who owes us money.
So anybody out there listening, you're saying if you hear this, get your checks in, right?
Yeah. So she's been great. She's been helping my dad since the beginning. So we couldn't do it without her.
Is your experience, has it been what you expected going into it? The Wall Street thing's got to be interesting too, because I can't imagine that going from Wall Street to construction materials is something that we see every day. You're probably the only one with that path, but was it a shock to you when you started to live this and breathe it every day?
No, I'll tell you, I absolutely love it. I love what we do. The finance thing was fun, but you're going into an office every day. I loved all the people that I was working with. We had a great team there. But what we do now is you're doing something different every day. So some days I'm in the office doing stuff, but a lot of times I'm out on the road. I'm with customers. You're at different plants every day. And I love that about this job, that every day is different. We see how customers do things differently across the state, across the region, which is nice too. We see how everybody does things a little bit differently. So we say, we're not necessarily the smartest people in the world, but we see a lot, and we've done a lot, and we've been around a lot. So, and that's how you gain a lot of experience, just seeing how people do things. So, no, but I absolutely love the job. I love the industry. There's a lot of really good people in this industry. Almost everybody you meet, they're good people. They work hard. You can't really ask for anything better.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of bad apples, and the ones that are bad apples probably don't stick around. They get booted out pretty quick because these are salt of the earth, down to earth people.
Yeah.
What else are you planning to see at the Ag One show here over the next day and a half? You're gonna be here for the next half day today?
Yep. Yeah. So we're gonna fly back to Albany tomorrow. Yeah, I've got a meeting with a customer at a booth later on this afternoon. I think I've been to all the booths for the most part that I wanted to stop by. Had a lot of good meetings. So probably keep doing that. And there's 2 events tonight that 2 different manufacturers are putting on. So we'll be there and seeing people and But it's been a really really good show. I think so far. So.
Have you gotten down to Broadway? And then maybe my last question, what was the best meal you had in the Music City this week?
Well, I'm on a pretty good streak that I've had a cheeseburger every day for lunch so far since I've been down here. So today was a double smash burger from the place across the street. That was delicious. The first day was a cheeseburger with brisket on top of it from Martin's Barbecue. That was also delicious. So yeah, the food's been really good.
Anything else you want to add, Matt? Really appreciate you joining us today, and I want to say too, thanks for always contributing to our dealer issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're listening out there, Pit and Quarry every July, I think for 5 or 6 years now we've been publishing an issue that we dedicate to dealer coverage, because the dealers at the end of the day, you guys are the ones that are touching upward to the manufacturers and downward to the customers. So I feel like you guys have a unique perspective on what's happening out there from 2 different vantage points.
Well, yeah, I mean that's really our job. It's essentially to know what's going on in our market and have the relationships with the customers. So yeah, so we feel like we keep a pretty good finger on the pulse of what's going on, and we know people on the manufacturing side and our customers. So really, what our job is to know what's going on in our area. So, but yeah, no, it's been a good show.
All right, well, that was Matt Dibble from Dibble Equipment. Matt, appreciate you coming to the booth. By the time we put this podcast out there, we're going to have the opportunity to engage Matt once more at the Young Leaders event. And I think I mentioned during my interview that I hadn't had the opportunity to meet Matt, and it was awesome to finally get to sit down with him, because he's been a big contributor, somebody I can just get on the phone and get some perspective for anything related to dealers. We do have our dealer issue coming up. If anybody's not aware of that, we put that out every July, and it's hard to believe that this is going to be the 7th dealer issue that Pit and Quarry puts out. So you can look for that in our July edition. Matt, I know your Buffalo Bills, we touched on that briefly. Your Buffalo Bills are near and dear to your heart. Again, wish them well, and hopefully our Brownies can keep pace here in Cleveland. But appreciate the perspective there, Matt. We've touched on already the fact that we're going to hear a little bit, too, from Clement Cazalot and Donny Barnas, a machinery partner. And Jack, you're the one who actually sat down with those 2 gentlemen in Nashville. What are we going to hear from those 2 on the show here?
Yeah, this was a a very interesting conversation I had with Clem and Donnie at Ag 1. Prior to our interview, Clem had hosted an education session. It was about an hour-long presentation, a lot of good stuff, and honestly, it was more than my meager brain could contain all at once. You kind of asked me what he talked about, and I'm like, man, it was a little bit of everything. He just kind of ran the gamut of the industry. Just a super smart guy with a great perspective on things. So. So he kind of dove a little bit in, gave a bit of a Cliff Notes version of his education session. Looking at trends in the market was kind of the big thing. It was the overarching scope of what he saw. He's going to get into what producers are kind of looking for as far as plants go. He had a really interesting kind of 3-pronged look at what he said were pain, greed, and fear, and he related that to the supply chain, access to capital, and regulation of the industry. So he's going to share some insight in that, and also just talking about something that we've certainly seen a lot of and has been a big talking point over the last few years, consolidation, M&A, stuff like that, just how that is sort of trending up, and up. And, Clement Cazalot, Donny Barnas, appreciate you guys joining us. A couple of really smart guys, a lot of fun to be around. So without further ado, here is Clement Cazalot and Donny Barnas of Machinery Partner. All right, and we are joined now by Clement Cazalot and Donny Barnas with Machinery Partner. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Jack, this is a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. First and foremost, how's Ag 1 been treating you guys? What's it like being back in Nashville?
Man, this is good. 2 years ago was a treat. ConExpo was fantastic, and I would say Ag 1 is always a highlight because you get actually all the top producers, all the top OEMs coming. That's where all the big announcements are done. So it's fantastic to have all the industry under one roof.
Yeah, I think this is the first time I'm going to come to Nashville and remember the trip. But I think it's been a great time for us. It's a lot of really high-end machines here, and I think it's great for us to talk to and get in front of.
There's still one night left, Donny. Let's not. Let's not etch this into the memory banks just yet. But no, that's great to hear. It's been good so far. Clem, yesterday, you on the first day Ag One, you provided an education session talking about market trends and the latest in aggregate technology. A lot of interesting stuff there. You know, it was about an hour presentation, so I guess to ask you to go over the whole thing might be a bit much. But you know, can you just kind of run us through some of what you saw as the highlights of your presentation and kind of what maybe our listeners should know the most?
Yeah, totally. So, and given the context, so we're a machinery partner, so we're an online marketplace focused solely on aggregate crushing, specialized equipment for our industry. And so that gives us a unique purview to see what's happening outside of the US, in Australia, in Europe, in Africa, and what's coming to the US or not. And so there are a few trends that we're picking up. Like the industry is not the same as pre-COVID. Like the logistics, the supply chain, everything happening. As we were speaking today, as like the port of Baltimore is closed out of this morning. That means like for some of us, like bringing equipment in the US, we can like right now we have like 4 ships that we're supposed to deliver there. So there's logistics, supply chain is still not the same as before COVID. So the 4 key trends that we're seeing is logistic has had a massive impact and still having an impact, which means actually when you look at market trends, innovation is driven by manufacturers, and manufacturers right now are retooling their supply chain to either simplify the machine or actually picking up new type of providers and like adapting for the Australian market, for the US market, what is going to fit in the supply chain, finding local suppliers of parts. So the first trend that I see is a change of how machines are built based on the supply chain.
And that was one of the things that I was going to bring up next here, is that you mentioned this kind of, you know, took me by surprise in a sense, because I feel like we are seeing a lot of people wanting to build sort of the biggest and best machines, and one of the things you said is you don't want to make bigger machines, you want to make more efficient machines, and so, you know, even if they're not necessarily the biggest.
So that's the second trend that I see across the US. So we have the chance to be now in 41 states, and like when you look at the data, actually the US is producing less aggregate now than 20 years ago. So that is actually not necessarily obvious when you're on the ground, but you have some parts of the countries that are overproducing and other parts that are like still recovering from what happened 10 years ago, and a lot of the consolidation in the industry. And so what we're seeing across the US is a rush to push for more efficiency out of the plants, and not necessarily creating de novo plants or like increasing the output of these plants that are right size for the market. So there is the infrastructure bill that is just starting to be spent, is actually going to even push and create more stress on the supply chain. But right now the trend that I see is when I speak with manufacturers is more efficiency, more fuel efficiency, more profitability per ton, per yards, out of the machines, as well as a rise of small producers that have a harder and harder time to access the materials that they need, and so you get like basically more efficiencies is the name of the game when we speak about plants these days.
Right, and you mentioned 3 things, and this was again kind of something that I took out of your presentation. 3 things that sort of impact innovation: pain, greed, and fear. And you know, you looked at supply chain complexity, access to capital, and
regulation.
Yeah, I couldn't even read my own handwriting on that one. But can you just talk a little bit about that?
Totally. So pain is the supply chain. So as a manufacturer, as a distributor, it's all about being reliable for the end customers, for the producers. And so that's a big driver of innovation, is how do we remove that pain of the supply chain. Nobody wants to have inventory sitting, waiting for parts, or idle because something was rushed in production, or like you cannot get the parts. So that's the main driver of innovation. The second piece is greed. So access to capital. Like we're all in this business to improve our local communities, but also have like access to this capital. So with the rise of interest rates, the rise of actually a lot of incentivization, like grants programs, especially in Europe, around like low emission production, you see actually a lot of the manufacturers retooling the supply chain also to access more capital, either more profit per machine by simplifying the machine, or actually tapping into new pockets of the market, which are like with the electrical, hybrid electric engineering that we're seeing. And the last piece is fear. Like nobody wants to develop a piece of equipment that will be ultimately banned by the market. So we are seeing the rise in California in new environmental rulings that are actually following what happened in Europe. And so you get a lot of creating future-proof equipment. And so that has been a lot of the drive also.
Right. maybe not necessarily an innovation per se, but I know one trend we've been seeing a lot in recent years is a lot of activity in mergers and acquisitions. And I know you talked a lot about sort of rebranding and consolidation in your presentation, and talked about the importance of that. Can you share a little bit about what you're seeing as far in the rebranding and consolidation side of things?
Yeah, so you have two different consolidations. So there is a consolidation definitely happening on the production side. You have like the rise of private equity coming into our market, being even more active now than they were in the past, and so you have a lot of consolidation happening. We're a very healthy industry. There needs to be more rocks produced, so that's why there is this push and this consolidation. And then on the producer side, I see more and more like the importance, because again, the supply chain is complex. The past 3 years, 4 years actually have, like with rise of the inflation, the rise of all the costs, like requires to get to more volume. The more volume you have as a producer is not complex. The more volume you have, the higher the quality, the more reliable you are, and the lower the cost. And so there is this push in the market for people who used to be like single producer brand to actually now operate as contract manufacturers for a lot of other brands to actually increase their production level. And at the same time, you also get consolidation. Like you have folks who are very, very active, like Terex, McLanahan, so many others that are actually finding the best suppliers, the best providers, and buying up to create this massive one-stop shop as providers.
Mm-hmm. Donny, I'll kind of get you in on this point as well. Get your word in edgewise. Obviously a lot of information there. I'd be lying if I said some of it didn't go completely over my head. You are far more educated than I, Clem. But all very good info. Just what are you guys seeing in the future from some of these trends, from the rebranding, recycling, consolidation, from just sort of everything that's going on in the industry right now? What are you guys predicting maybe the rest of this year into 2025?
Yeah, I think the most important part about that, honestly, is the sort of the transparency across the industry, right? So we have a bunch of equipment coming from either the same factory, different factories, painted different colors, and it's sort of only going to get more and more confusing from a consumer side going forward. And what we're trying to do at Machinery Partners, democratize as much of that data and make it as transparent as possible across to compare. You're not just buying the red one because you like red, right? There's different tons per hour, different measurements, and I think we're going to continue to see that trend. It's something I get asked about a lot, being an online manufacturer distributor, is, oh, you only sell to like the tech forward people who buy everything online. And honestly, it's a good mix of that, and then plus people that are getting dragged into the internet because of this just democratization of data for everyone across the board. So it's really an interesting, I see more of it happening throughout the year. I think we've been told we're crazy every day for selling equipment sight unseen, and I think it's becoming less and less of a crazy as the year goes on, and we're seeing it in some of the results we have too. So I think that push to more data online being available to everybody across brands is really what's going to be what I see in the next year really taking off.
And if like building upon that, because of this push to efficiency, what we see actually is the aggregate is the poor sibling of the mining industry. So, and what we see is over the past 10 years, when I look at the number of patents, when I look at like what Metso that was announcing some innovation yesterday, like all the top like people playing in the mining world, actually the introduction, the innovation introduced on mining 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, actually little by little bleeds into our aggregate ecosystem. And so that's what we're super excited about, because in terms of trend, like we're definitely seeing more and more complex equipment that are picking up on mature technology from the mining side that now are like affordable enough to be put in the aggregate equipment, and so that means more complexity to select. And so what I'm super excited here is everyone at AG1 is an expert, and we're seeing like a lot of these operators, but also the new generation of, like we're speaking about like the young leader in the NSSGA earlier, like a lot of us like becoming really, really deep into this. How do we select the right equipment, whether that's through dealers, whether that's through online comparison platforms, or whether that's like through speaking with OEMs that are more and more transparent about what is good and what are like the gaps depending on the application. So really exciting about to see how the industry is just evolving and changing, like over the,
Yeah, like you said, very exciting times. A lot of great info, Clem. I thought you made it very digestible. So excellent job on the presentation yesterday. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here today, and enjoy the rest of AG1, and best of luck with whatever Machinery Partners got coming on down the line.
And go Pete and Quarry, thank you so much for bringing us all under the same roof to speak about the future of the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. All right, that was Clement Cazalot and Donny Barnas with Machinery Partner. Thank you guys again for taking some time to talk with us. A lot of good insight there. he kind of talked about one interesting thing that we've seen a little bit of as far as M&A stuff goes. He talked about how rebranding is a big thing. I know one that recently comes to mind: Superior acquiring Semco, fellow Hall of Famer Neil Heiss, former Semco president and owner, becoming a part of the Superior brand, but sort of retaining that Semco VSI name. So just some interesting dynamics at play. Really shows how much there is to think about when you're doing these kind of deals, and just how much is going into what we see is like, a deal got made. All the time and consideration and the different steps that have to take part to make that happen was just a really interesting insight, and provided some good insight for what he expects the rest of this year and into next year. So good. Definitely good to talk with them. He's a guy that I have emailed a ton, but hadn't met him face to face until Ag 1, and hopefully I'll be seeing him around a lot more.
That's the beauty of the show, and I think part of the beauty of the podcast too, Jack, is again we're on our 14th episode, going on 15 here in another couple of weeks. But this has helped us engage our readership, from dealers to manufacturers to the end users on the producer front. So just to add on one thing he said about rebranding, because that is something that has to be dealt with and handled when an acquisition goes down. There's so much brand equity, in existing companies and product lines, that have really well thought of names, well respected names in the industry. So, when an acquisition goes down, whether it's like a Semco, like you described, there's a loyalty among the customer base to those brands. These are, again, businesses, family businesses in some cases, or longtime people who pour themselves into the industry, and they consider themselves a representative or a user of XYZ crusher or screen, and like I'm a Terex guy, or I'm a Mezzo guy, or what I mean. So, not to say that those are companies that are doing some of the mergers and acquisitions, but when big names like that are changing hands, and we see that on the producer front too, it's something to think about. I think about it too on the producer level, Jack. You get CRH that has a certain way of doing things, and when they acquire another producing company, they say XYZ, a CRH company. Whereas some other big name producers that are regularly making acquisitions, they want to eventually have them take on their name. And, it's a balancing act. I think if you're selling your business, there's a lot of pride in what goes in that name. So, I think that's certainly a trend that Clem hit on, and something we're going to continue to see is consolidation isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, and just one last thought on the idea of rebranding. Even outside of consolidation, you look at moves like Lehigh Hansen becoming Hansen, Heidelberg Cement or Heidelberg Materials rebranding Heidelberg Cement as Heidelberg Materials, sort of on a smaller scale. Capital Aggregates, a company, we talked with Jamie Jones and Chris Williams at Ag 1, a company we worked a lot with, that rebranding all of their operations under Capital Aggregates. Again, one of those things that, you don't necessarily want to ruin a good thing if it's of a well-known company and well-known name, but those kind of things are done. Obviously, they're done for a reason, and people that make those decisions are making a lot more money and are far smarter than I am. So I'll trust them to keep doing the right thing there.
Same for me. I think we're in the same boat here, Jack. That's why we're doing the question asking,
yes,
not delivering the answers. But again, as we were crafting this episode, kind of taking some of the cuts that we gathered from Ag 1, we identified we wanted to kind of marry our two dealer interviews together. But as I was kind of listening back and thinking about other cuts we wanted to put out there in episode 14, I kind of settled on George Sidney at McLanahan Corporation, in part because he talked about consolidation of the industry from a wider view, I would say, than what Clem and Donny kind of brought to the floor at Ag 1. But, George, again, president of McLanahan Corporation for a number of years, with McLanahan for 45 years, I believe. So he has great perspective on how the industry has changed. And he said when he was asked at one point by another Pit and Quarry representative at one point years ago, that he was asked, what's the biggest change you've experienced or seen in the industry? And the answer was obvious. He's going to deliver that answer here in a moment, and it relates to consolidation. So let's hear from George Sidney, longtime McLanahan president and 2019 inductee of the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame. And welcome back to the Ag 1 Aggregates Academy and Expo show floor. We're back in the Pit and Quarry booth, and we've got George Sidney from McLanahan Corporation with us. George, great to see you.
Good to be here. Good to be seen.
Well, we're seeing a lot of people here on the show floor. This is day one. We're and we're sitting down with George, and we were here around 9, 10 o'clock, and the line of people flowing toward the registration desk, George, was just unlike anything I've ever seen. It seems like this is a good sign, a healthy sign for the agri industry. What's your take on what you're seeing here on day one of Ag 1?
No, it's overwhelming. I mean, I just came off the show floor, and the aisles are packed. It's tough to actually walk the aisles because there's so many people. But, here again, they've set records with attendance. I believe it's over 15,000 people here.
Wow.
So,
and just 2 years ago, I think it was 11 plus or 12 plus, so that's a big jump.
I don't think they broke 11, but this is very encouraging.
Good sign of the times. And George, of course, we had you last night at the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Thanks for being there.
Oh, it was fabulous, and the 4 folks that were inducted, I knew them all, and a couple of them are very close friends of mine. So I was glad to see that take place, and to see them recognized and installed in that Hall of Fame in Leadville. It's a beautiful thing.
You've been up to Leadville once or twice, I believe.
Oh, well, I used to run that territory a lot, and it used to be business. Now it's fly fishing. So I'm still in the area doing that. But no, it's Leadville's the same as it was 150 years ago, which makes it unique. And to have that museum there is just, it's a treasure. It really is a treasure. So I would encourage anybody, even if you're not in the Hall of Fame, to visit that to see what they have, because they've done just a first-class job of putting that museum together.
And one of the exciting things about the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame is that we have this partnership with the National Mining Hall of Fame and Museum, where the replica plaques of each inductee in the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame lives on, and it's displayed on the walls of the facility there in Leadville. George, just as you think about the 24 inductees, between Charlie Luck and Tom Hill, Neil Heiss and Lewis Johnson, I guess maybe what jumps out, maybe a few words on each, since it sounds like you knew each at least a little bit. We were talking about Neil this morning. I mean, sounds like that's one you're close to.
Neil's a very close friend, and he always has been a close friend, and not just with me, but with the entire family. They have more or less adopted our daughter, and I've more or less adopted theirs, and we've fallen on some hard times this past year, and Neil and his family were right there to help pick us up, and it just shows the kind of friendship that you can develop in this industry, because that's what this industry is made up of: good, honest, credible people. And of course, Charlie Luck. I mean, seriously, do they come any better than Charlie? I mean, he's just the real deal, and he and I have been friends for a lot of years, and we like to share, and we do, and it was a pleasure to see him part of that group. Lewis Johnson, never met Lewis because he died before I ever had the opportunity to, but I did spend time with his wife in their home, talking about business matters, and I will cherish that meeting time. Just nice people, very nice people once again. And then Tom Hill, I mean, what can you say? I mean, here's a guy that's done over 300 acquisitions. In my career, I think I did maybe 6.
A lot of work goes into those, right?
Oh, I can't even put into words how much work it is. And to hear him say he's done 300 acquisitions, I honestly don't know when he slept. And then to also hear him say that he did 300 attempts that didn't work out. So
there's a lot of time that goes into those as well, right?
He's a special man. He truly is. There are not too many that could do what he's done. So congratulations to all of them. Well deserved.
Well, George, you're a Pit and Quarry Hall of Famer yourself, obviously, and it's always wonderful when we get to these big meetings. We saw you at the Mine Exchange show not too long ago in February down in Phoenix, I guess it was this year.
Yes.
What do you find yourself doing these days? I know you're spending a lot of time in Montana.
Yeah, well, I do a lot of fly fishing, and but I sit on a couple industry boards and still on our company board as a director. and do a little consulting from time to time. And other than that, I'm enjoying life. I really questioned what life would be like after working 80 hours a week. And I had a little push from my wife. I mean, not too long after retirement, she sat me down and said, you're either going to get yourself a project or I'm going to get you a therapist. So that's when I moved to Montana and built a house. And that got me into retirement, and I haven't looked back. It's been wonderful, and I have this industry to thank for it. I truly do. You work hard at anything, the end result is it pays you back, and that's what's happening to me. So I couldn't be happier.
George, as you look at the industry then and now, when you got into it, what we're seeing today, it's a good, vibrant industry. There's a lot of opportunity there, it seems. There's challenges too at the same time. I suppose you could argue that that's the scenario, whether it's today or day one, year one, when you were in the industry. What are the biggest changes you've seen in your time, and how do you feel the industry is situated here in 2024?
Well, it's kind of interesting. Your predecessor interviewed me before I retired, and he asked me the question, what's the biggest change you've seen in the industry in your 45 plus years? And then he followed that up with, and if you don't have an answer for that, you can think about it and get back to me. And I said, I don't have to think about it. That's an easy answer. So when I started years ago, companies were managed based on longevity of the plant, longevity of the company. They were mainly run by operations people, and so that's what their interest was, the longevity of the equipment and the plant. Today, they're managed by accountants and lawyers, and now they're managing to a quarterly dividend. And that's a huge difference, and we've had to acclimate to that, because no longer were they interested so much in a piece of equipment, for instance, or a process that lasted 20 or 30 years. They were interested in what that payback would be in 2 to 3 years. And that's a big difference. And if a company can't acclimate to that change, which is very significant, they're going to run into problems dealing today. As far as the industry as a whole in 2024, this is, I don't know that we've had many brighter times than we have right now. This is just a very, very good time to be in this business. And those that play their cards right are going to capitalize.
We've seen companies evolve over the years as well, and McLanahan has to be the oldest company in our industry, one of the oldest in America, probably, at this point, too. In recent years, we've seen McLanahan get into some different space, Rebel Crusher, Diefenbach, some other companies. You touched on the 6 acquisitions that you were a part of over the years.
Yeah.
When you look at the company that you spent so much time with, it seems like it's changing, and I guess all of us are changing in some way to keep up with the times and the direction of our industry and where it's going.
Well, if you don't change, you'll go out of business. Simple. That's just a simple formula. You have to change, and you have to change smart. I've seen a lot of companies change not so smart, and they're not here with us today, or they've been gobbled up by somebody bigger. And if you stay close enough to the industries that you serve, and we serve a number of different industries, but if you stay close enough to those industries, you know how to change. The industry will tell you how you have to change. You just have to be flexible enough to do that change the proper way. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, I think so.
That's what we see.
George, maybe just a final thought, but as you look outward to the next 45 years, that's how much time you dedicated to your craft and to this market. How do you feel things are going to unfold? Do you have a hopeful outlook on where things are going for us? Because we aren't necessary. We are critical to civilization and in our way of life here, modern world, modern country. Are you excited about the potential for the aggregates industry?
I'm yes. That would be the overlying response, yes. However, there's a lot of apprehension I have about where we're going. I sat in on a session yesterday that talked about revenue for infrastructure spending. And one of the things I see some of these climate change folks pushing is the EV vehicles, okay? Well, if you have an electric vehicle, you're not buying gasoline, which means now gasoline tax revenues are decreasing significantly. So how do you make that up? I know in the state of Pennsylvania they were trying to push through a bill where EV vehicle owners were going to have to pay some sort of mileage tax, or
Like a miles traveled thing.
Yeah. And you know, it just seems like some of these people that are so bent on this climate awareness aren't thinking the issues through. You know, for instance, if you have a battery-operated vehicle and the battery goes bad, are you really going to afford to spend 30 grand for a new battery when you can just go out and buy a new vehicle? Okay, so you buy a new vehicle. What do you do with the old one? It's not like you're going to sell that on the used car market. So what do you do with it? You know, what do you do with that vehicle physically? I mean, it's not like something you're going to take to a landfill. So it's going to be interesting to see where they work this, how they work this through. But I honestly have concerns about decisions being made now that they're not thinking far enough in the future to see how those decisions are going to affect them 20 years down the road, because they will have an adverse effect in many ways.
Well, George, any parting words, anything you want to share with our audience on Drilling Deeper here at the Pit and Quarry podcast?
Well, I would say, keep your head up and keep moving, because this industry and the economy is moving fast, and if you're not willing to keep pace with it, you're going to find yourself lagging behind. I think we're in exciting times. Infrastructure is an absolute must for this country, not just this country, but the world. And it's going to be exciting to be a part of that. And if you can play a significant role in that endeavor, I think you're going to have a good future.
George, appreciate you joining us here. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Ag One show.
Oh, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Well, that was George Sidney from McLanahan. George, thanks for joining us. And thanks again for being at the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame induction ceremony this year. Always great to see you and have you at that event. George touched on a lot of different things. He talked about industry consolidation, again, is kind of the big change, and how, when he got started in this industry, it wasn't, a public industry, and it very much is today. And I think the wheels are going to continue spinning in that direction, where we see, more big companies coming in. We even saw, a company from the UK come in not too long ago, and Breeding Group partnering with New Frontier Materials, so that's just going to continue. Maybe we'll see more international players identify the U.S., because we've certainly seen that on the manufacturing front, companies from Europe and other parts of the world identifying this is the number one growth market in the industry. So I think the consolidation of the industry is going to continue to change. More players are going to come in, and George certainly hit on something that remains relevant today. I think he talked about something interesting too about funding for our infrastructure, with the electric vehicles and the advent of that, and there's obviously a big push on the EV front, and there's mandates, and we haven't even really gotten close to figuring out what the funding mechanism is going to look like with electric vehicles being mainstream, assuming that's the route that we're ultimately going to stay on. So again, I really thought George had good viewpoints on the 20-30 year outlook for our industry. He had a very positive outlook overall, and I can't really disagree with anything he said. I think the road ahead for aggregates 20-30 years from now looks good, because he kind of plainly said, the world needs infrastructure, not just the U.S., but the world does. So there's great opportunities for growth there. Well, we're winding down the episode 14 of Drilling Deeper here, the Pit and Quarry podcast. And Jack, we could probably just share some of the things we're working on here internally at the magazine. By the time this goes out, we're going to already be back from the Young Leaders event, and I know you're excited about getting down to San Antonio. We've got our May edition that's probably going to be in everyone's mailboxes by the time this airs as well. So if you got that in hand or if you're eagerly awaiting that, we've got a special crushing and hydraulic braking pull-out supplement within that issue. So look for that, pull that out, and soak in the content. You know, Jack, we're already starting to work on June. I know we're filming this here in April, the end of April, but we're always, again, working 4, 5, 6 weeks ahead. And, we'll have some content related to conveying, screening, wear parts, e-ticketing, and that issue. And again, with the dealer theme, our July issue, that's not too far behind. So, anybody wanting to engage the magazine in terms of trends and things that you guys are seeing on the dealer side, I'd encourage dealers to reach out to Jack, to reach out to me, as we're going to be starting to put some dealer-centric stories and perspectives together for the July edition of Pit and Quarry, which, again, will be the 7th dealer issue in the history of Pit and Quarry magazine. So, Jack, anything else you're working on at the moment? I know you got portable plants coming up as well, and I know you're excited about Young Leaders.
Oh, yeah. Young Leaders is going to be a great time. Again, that's one of those events that I've only been to one myself, but from hearing, yourself, our publishers, Rob and Dino, talk about it, and from my one experience, that's one of those events that NSSGA always does such a good job of. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Looking forward to being a part of your last non-alumni year, Young Leader. I know I had to get that. I had to get that dig in there, but no, it's going to be a good time. Looking forward to that. That's going to be a great trip. And like you mentioned, as we're working on Pit and Quarry June, also working on Portable Plants June. So that'll be coming out around the same time. Just sort of getting everything put together there. Got a couple good features in hand. Got some stories coming out that I think any contractors, any portable plants operators are gonna like. So be on the lookout for that as well. And just continuing to chug along, unpack these Ag 1 interviews, and as Kevin mentioned, to any dealers or to really anyone out there, if there's anything you wanna share with us or hear on this podcast, our emails are linked in the description below. Jay Kopanski at northcoastmedia.net, K Yannick at northcoastmedia.net. Feel free to shoot us an email. Let us know what you want to hear, and we'll try to make it happen.
Yeah, some more Ag 1 interviews to come. We had manufacturers, producers. We unpacked our dealer interviews here today, so more on the other sides to come in the episodes to follow. And for Jack Kopanski, I'm Kevin Yannick. Thanks for listening, everybody.